Okay, everybody, welcome to EDT-8130. This is week number 5 of our web conference. So on the screen here, you'll see some of our getting started activities. You want to make sure everything is set up in your Collaborate panel. This will include doing your audio and video tests to make sure everything's working well for you. You'll want to, at the bottom right-hand corner, expand your attendee panel. You can drag that to the left and drop the panel to open it, and then you'll want to also open your chat icon in the same lower right-hand corner so you can view any chat discussion that's happening during class. Again, this is 8130, and this is our week 5 web conference. I'm your instructor, Candace. And we'll do a quick quality check here for everyone. So you'll want to make sure you can hear me effectively, that you see the recording button in the upper left-hand corner, that you've performed your own audio video checks, and that your environment is free from distractions. So make sure your phone is on silent, the door is closed, any potential interruptions or noises are taken care of at this point. If you are having any issues with any of those things on the list, please go ahead and type into the text chat or hop on the microphone and we'll try to get those worked out. Okay, our learning objectives for this week, we will be defining social presence as related to the community of inquiry. We'll be providing examples of how confirmation bias can negatively impact social interactions in settings. We'll provide examples of how social presence can be more positively and negatively impacted in online communities of inquiry. And then we're going to identify ways to improve social presence from an in-person class setting scenario to an online learning community. The section we'll be covering is going to discuss social presence from our textbook, Thinking Collaboratively, and this is out of Chapter 6. Okay, so to get started, we're going to do a little feedback activity here in your text chat, which is on the lower right-hand side of your panel. I'd like everybody to go ahead and type a response identifying a way that confirmation bias can negatively impact social interaction in a group setting. So this doesn't necessarily have to be a classroom setting, but just a group setting in general. And for our virtual listeners, go ahead and include this information in your class summary. Okay, we have some responses coming in here. So Annika is saying those with different opinions might not speak up for fear of what the rest of the group will say. And that's kind of along the same lines of what Melinda is adding here, and it prevents the sharing of ideas. I think those are both very valid ways that confirmation bias can kind of impede progress in group settings. And Katie jumped in here, in situations where there is no outside input, there can be gaps created or mistakes made. And that's a great example as well. So when you have no additional input and everyone's kind of looking at that same perspective, that confirmation bias can lead to a lot of mistakes and a lot of missed information that could be available. All right, so we're going to explore a few definitions here. As you probably read in the textbook, we are looking at a lot of the community of inquiry definitions. So you'll see the grid here gives you an example of how some of these overlap. So we have a community of inquiry. This is just an educational experience, and it has 3 different types of presence: teaching, social, and cognitive. And those are all supported by the content, the climate, and the discourse. So today we're going to explore a little bit more of the social presence that can happen in a community of inquiry. So the definition of social presence is basically an interactive and interrelated communication contributing a feeling of community and a common academic purpose. So our class that we're participating in right now would be a type of social presence in a community of inquiry. as we look at the definition of social presence, it has evolved over time. So in the past, social presence was really considered more as the strictly physical cues, such as smiling and eye contact, projections of just your social skills and emotions, and more based on interpersonal relationships. So as we jump back to the previous screen, you'll see how that has developed over time, and it is based a lot more on the different types of communication and the connections that group members or class members in this case may have with that common goal, and in our case, a common academic purpose. All right, so we're on to our next activity here. As you'll see on your screen, you have a thumbs up and a thumbs down. So I'd like you to use the text tool. You'll see that example in the upper or the bottom of the screen here. You can find that on the upper left-hand corner of your screen. I'd like everybody to type on the thumbs up side a way that social presence can be positively impacted in an online community of inquiry, and then a way that it can be negatively impacted on the right-hand side where the thumbs down hand is. So everybody can type on each side, and make sure as you're typing in you press enter so your response will end up on the screen. For our virtual listeners, go ahead and include some of these ideas on your class summary. If everybody can just add at least one example to each side of the screen, we'll wait for some responses to discuss. Okay, we'll start kind of going over these, and feel free to keep typing as we continue on here. So in the side where we talk about how social presence can be more positively impacted in an online community of inquiry, we're saying less inhibited by others' opinions, creates a sense of belonging, and in the online situations, it opens opportunities for more diversity. I think these are all great and valid input on how this can be positively impacted. If we're not in that group setting, we're kind of not face-to-face with people, so it helps you express your input and your thoughts a little bit easier, perhaps. It does create that sense of belonging, and I think for me at least, you don't see people face-to-face, so you understand everybody's kind of in the same situation as you. We're all learning online, and that can create a sense of belonging. And it does open opportunities for more diversity. And sometimes you don't even realize the diversity that's available there, because you have so many backgrounds, and you're not necessarily exposed to those visually. So it can create a lot of different input. Now, on the negative side, we're seeing some input saying there are harsher opinions and thoughts. Kind of talk about like keyboard warriors. We hear that a lot, where people maybe say things they wouldn't necessarily say face-to-face, and that can be very challenging, particularly in social media. Some people will not contribute, and that's also true. And I think you'd find that a lot in an in-person class. So there are probably ways we can kind of facilitate that participation. And online situations can sometimes be alienating for individuals who are unfamiliar with it. And I think that's also a great point. That was actually one reason that made me nervous to participate in an online learning system, because when I was getting my bachelor's degree, everything was in person. There were really no online course options, so it can be a little intimidating, and I think it may take some time for some people to kind of get on board and be more familiar and comfortable with that. Thank you, everybody, for your great suggestions. Okay, we are going to next move into breakout rooms for a case study. So I'm going to input a Google Slide link into the text chat. If you're able to click directly on that link, go ahead, or you can copy and paste it into your Chrome web browser. And then I'm going to open up breakout rooms. So since we just have a small class today, you'll all just go into group 1 for the breakouts and review the case study that's found on the Google Slides. So go ahead while you're discussing this with your group mates, add notes to the page because we'll do an application share after the case study, so we can have a report back from everyone in the group to give a little bit of feedback on some of your discussions. So you'll want to make sure before you return back to the main room, you kind of decide who's going to talk about what. We'll give you 3 minutes to do that here. And then for our virtual listeners, you can go ahead and pause the presentation once you've opened up the Google Link slide. Go ahead and present at least 3 examples into your class summary that you can provide from this case study as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and paste that link in there. If you have any trouble with the link, please get on the microphone here or type it into the text chat so that we know you're having some issues. And then I will go ahead and open the breakout groups. You'll go ahead and use the little door that you can see here on the right-hand side of your screen there, and I'll set a timer for 3 minutes, and so you'll return back here after about 3 minutes.
Oh, that's right. She can just bring everybody back.
Okay.
Okay, has everybody returned? All right, looks like it. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and move into the application share so we can take a look at your notes, and then we will have the group report back with your feedback from the case study. So give me just 1 second. Okay, there we go. All right, so whoever wants to hop on the microphone first, go ahead and give us some feedback about the case study with Dr. Reynolds' class and how we can improve from this in-person class setting scenario to an online learning community.
Okay, I'll start. We talked about he could use breakout rooms in the learning management system, kind of similar to what he's doing in class. But we talked about the instructor picking the groups instead of the students picking their own groups, so that they would have some diversity instead of just maybe picking a group where they're with their friends or someone that's, you know, just like them. Also have everyone contribute when they're online, not just volunteers. So he could, you know, call on certain people. They could use the chat box and different other mechanisms. And then Annika was talking about discussion boards, and they have discussion boards that you have to post something before you can see everything else. So students could post something on there, and they have to do that before they could see everybody else's answers, so they couldn't just kind of duplicate what they saw.
Okay, great. All right. Any additional ideas from the group?
No, I think you covered everything we talked about.
Okay, great. Those were all thanks, Katie and Annika, all great ideas. I think the online, in this situation, the online learning community could probably improve the class quite a bit. With Dr. Reynolds here, we see a lot of that lecture and a lot of writing of the bullet point note on the board. So that might result in a little cognitive overload. So by moving that to an online scenario, there might be more visual effects that could help lessen the cognitive overload, and a little less text that students are trying to read and maybe copy down some of those notes. With that interaction, like you said, Melinda, there are opportunities to use those Blackboard Collaborate tools. It gives students an opportunity to use maybe the text tools, the text chat, the microphone, some of those shapes and things that they can use on the slides. And then, of course, in our class, we don't do this as much, but you have the option to use the camera. So have a little bit more of that face-to-face with an instructor instead of his back being turned to write notes on the board all the time. And you hit it right on the money there with the The groups, I think sometimes choosing your own groups can be detrimental to some classes because you will have a lot of the same students pairing up, a lot of the same individuals providing feedback if there's not some of that forced interaction. So this would also help spread that work out and make sure the groups are doing an even amount of work as opposed to the same individuals providing some of that same feedback and leading into a lot of the confirmation bias that we might experience. Okay. All right, and we'll have to get back to our slide here, so give me just 1 second. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson today. We went through a lot of our learning objectives here in defining social presence as related to communities of inquiry. We discussed multiple examples of how confirmation bias can negatively impact social interaction. We discussed a lot of examples of how social presence can be more positively and negatively impacted in online communities of inquiry. And then we identified different ways that we can improve social presence from an in-person classroom scenario to an online learning community. So a lot of great feedback from everybody today in the class. If there are any questions, feel free to jump on the microphone or type into the text chat. Okay, doesn't look like any questions are coming through. So for our virtual listeners, if you do have questions at the end of this web conference, feel free to add those to your class summary assignment. And we will see you all next week for our week number 6 class. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thanks, everybody.